Okay, everybody. So first of all, I'm going to throw this out. For those who who aren't seeing this live, you just missed some of my coolest socks. So you guys got to show up for the live version because sometimes Scott makes me show socks before he hits record. So those of you who are on here, you got a special treat. But okay, so I want to talk a little bit about when betrayal occurs. I'm not going to get like scientific. I'm not going to quote studies. What I'm going to talk about, I'm going to try the best I can to talk about what it feels like when betrayal comes up. And when you realize that when a partner is going through betrayal, it can come up at any time. It can come up. You guys, are a year into recovery, and you've got good sobriety on your belt, and all of a sudden, this flash of betrayal comes up, a trigger, trauma response, whatever you want to call it. And when it comes up, it's so wild, but it feels almost for so many betrayers, for so many people who have been betrayed, almost like this out of body experience where they within themselves are questioning their own reality. They're questioning, and to try and explain what I mean by this, it hurts so bad. They feel crazy. And it's almost like they know, okay, I don't think this is totally real. Like all of this intensity that I'm feeling, especially when the betrayal is fresh, this is happening. But it can happen at any time. But what comes up for them is this: I feel crazy and I want somebody to validate me that like I have a right to feel crazy. But it's such a mind altering experience that somebody could tell them that they're crazy and they actually will believe it because it feels so painful, so disconnecting, that if an unhealthy person validates that craziness and says, no, you're crazy, I don't know what you're thinking and why you're thinking this, yeah, you're off your rocker, everything inside of them is going to attach to that and go, yeah, okay, that makes sense, because I feel so crazy that it almost feels better to think that it's real that they're crazy. And so it's super important when somebody's experiencing betrayal trauma to validate, no, you're not crazy. You are in pain, whether it's something that I did now or something that I did before, or whether it's something somebody else did. You are completely in reality. It's just painful. And the amount of physiological pain that occurs feels it feels beyond what would be normal. I mean, it's literal physiological pain within the center of self. And it just aches and hurts and feels sickening. It also can manifest as like overall body aches, almost like you got the flu really bad. I mean, these are the physiological pains and pressures. You've got racing thoughts. They'll often they can't sleep, because if they fall asleep for a little bit, they wake up and their brain is just going at 100 miles an hour. The lack of sleep makes it even worse because they're not because then they're not refreshed for a new day, and they're even more likely to feel that trigger, and and they get headaches because of a lack of sleep. I mean, this is an absolutely like cascading event that occurs. So understanding when somebody hits that betrayal wound, or that betrayal wound becomes fresh, this is a very, very real, painful, completely confusing, disorienting experience. So I thought I'd try and lean into that a little bit. Sometimes when I'm all day long talking about betrayal trauma, both to those who have been betrayed and those who have done the betraying. And sometimes it's, we get so used to talking about it, we forget what that physiological experience actually feels like, how it affects them. The most important thing you can do is validate. You're not crazy. You have a right to feel everything you're feeling. No, I may not understand it exactly, but I'm glad you're telling me, and I want to hear more. What else do you need to share with me? All of these responses can be very helpful at helping them ground, bringing them back into a healthy reality and a healthy experience for them. And so, it's not a full 15 minutes worth of education, but I figured I'd throw it out there. If you got any questions about that experience, about what you experienced that might be different than what I'm describing, put it up there and let's talk about it. Scott, what do you got?
Well, first of all, pop some questions into the Q&A, because otherwise you just have to listen to Matt and I wing it. And we're going to talk about socks and walls and balconies if you make that happen. So, I mean, we call this betrayal trauma for a reason. It's trauma. And betrayed partners typically have trauma reactions. And I think about, and maybe I've told this story before, but when I was about 14 or so, we had cats. I still have cats, but one of them got my father right on the vein in his wrist with the claw, and he was spurting blood from his wrist as his heart was pumping, and he was freaking out. So me, not yet of driving age, hopped in this stick shift car and piled him in there, and we whipped it down to the hospital, and he was screaming at me because I was going to what he thought was the wrong side of the hospital. No, the emergency room was open. So I literally had to drive to the wrong side of the hospital. So to say, this is where the emergency room used to be, now it's in, then we drove him over to the right side. He was panicking. He was in crisis.
Disoriented in crisis.
And this is a lawyer and a judge. I mean, clearly in crisis.
And the interesting thing is like, to help people understand, when we talk about like attachment styles, whether we're secure, anxious, or whether we're avoidant or dismissive, right? We talk about these attachment styles. What we need to understand is that attachment styles are according to our primary attachment figures. And when we're married, our primary attachment figure is our spouse. At least that's what it's designed to be. And so even if our spouse is disconnected, been living in an addiction, whether we know it or not, we're pouring our heart into this person. And even if our marriage isn't that good, like, it's still where we're putting our effort and our energy and our attachment. So when that attachment bond is fractured, whether it's through betrayal, and look, I mean, we can talk about the different types of attachment wounds. We use the word betrayal because that's the most common, but not everybody who experiences a spouse who's an addict, who gets a disclosure, feels betrayal. One person, it might be betrayal, another one's rejection, another one feels abandoned, another one feels loss, and you might feel all of these, right? But like, that separation is, as you could imagine, like a child being taken from a parent. Not that I'm comparing a marital relationship to a parent, but if you pull somebody's primary attachment away from them, or you show them your primary attachment's never really been here because of an addiction, the amount of physiological, emotional, psychological pain that person is going through is unreal.
Yeah. And it hurts so bad that you feel crazy. I mean, that's what you led with, and you need some validation that it's okay. Since this is technically a Prodependence for couples webinar, one of the reasons Dr. Rob came up with Prodependence is because it's much more validating for a betrayed partner than codependence, where the betrayed partner gets blamed. How often do you see still, even though Prodependence is becoming a thing, and thank you, Matt, for being an early adopter, but how often do you still see people coming in and either being blamed by the cheating partner, or being blamed by themselves, or being blamed by their support network? Well, if you were nicer, he wouldn't, that kind of thing. Or if
Well,
you weren't so messed up, you wouldn't be with him in the first place.
so I love that you're bringing that up. Blame is an interesting thing because what I've found in so many relationships is that blame, yeah, I guess if we slow it down and we talk a little bit about intentionality. I see a lot of blame occur, but it's not always intended. So to give you an example, if I don't know, I was going to try and use an example between Scott and I, but it's kind of hard. But what I'm saying is, like, I've seen a lot of couples where somebody will try to explain themselves, and they try to say, well, this is why I did this thing, and it comes across as blame. It very much sounds like blame. It feels like blame. Um, and so what we have to try and figure out, like, am I blaming you to deflect and shut you down and make you stop, like, coming after me or attacking me? Or am I actually just terrible at explaining myself? Right. So I see blame all the time, but I try to slow down and try and figure out, like, what is going on here? Are you intending to blame him or her? Or are you trying to explain yourself? And if you're just trying to explain yourself, can you see why that looks like blame? Why that feels so terrible to your partner? How do you take ownership of what you're trying to explain so that it doesn't blame them? So I don't know if I totally went off on a tangent.
No, I think you got that. And, you know, it's very important for betrayed partners not to accept blame
Oh,
for the cheating action, number one, under any circumstances, whether it's intentionally being blamed or inadvertently being blamed, which happens a lot. When I get defensive, I kind of go on the attack inadvertently. I'm trying to defend myself, but it feels like an attack to people who are receiving it. So yeah, let's just, Matt and I both at the same time say, it's not your fault. 1, 2, 3,
oh,
it's
it's
not your
not your
fault.
fault.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And the hard part is that sometimes a betrayed partner feels so out of control that if they can figure out how to make it their fault, it feels better. Because if I can make it my fault, then maybe I can prevent myself from being hurt again. That's not possible, right?
Yeah.
You cannot prevent yourself from the possibility of getting hurt. My betrayed partners hate it when I say this, but I will say this over and over again. If you are going to have a healthy relationship, and this is going to actually go to one of the questions, the second question in the queue, we'll get there in a bit. But if you are going to have a healthy relationship, you eventually have to get back to a place where you give them the power to hurt you worse than they've ever hurt you before, because that's what a healthy, trusting, intimate relationship actually looks like. Now, that doesn't mean go be fully vulnerable right away and risk getting that hurt again. But eventually that's where we want to get. Otherwise, why are we having a relationship, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
So it's absolutely not your fault. But sometimes it's easier to make it our fault because then we feel like we're in control.
Yeah. Yeah. And yes, don't do it. First question, not a question. Geese are scary. We talked about it in partners group. We were discussing the geese outside of Matt's office earlier. So,
Well, and I don't know if they're geese, that they make a noise that sounds like geese. So
okay. All right. We'll call
maybe I
them
don't
geese.
have scary geese out there. I don't know.
Okay. Okay, let's jump into the questions now. We've been married for 36 years. Found out about his sex addiction 7 years ago. He relapsed 20 months ago, and we've been in-house separated since then. He's now in recovery for about 6 months. How do we start to reintegrate after living separately for so long? So they've been in in-house separation for 20 months.
Yeah. So here's the hard part. You may not love my response right now. It may feel very uncomfortable. I'm not personally, so I'm not going to make a judgment about your situation because I have no idea what is actually happening in your situation. And you may have made the perfect choice for you guys, and good for you. Keep going forward. But I will say this to everybody listening. I'm not a huge fan um, of separations. When separations need to occur, they're wonderful. But it's almost like a last resort before divorce. Divorce. Said that weird. It's almost like a last resort before a divorce to try a separation. And the reason is separation is the opposite of attachment, if that makes sense. I'm all for how do we figure out how to attach. Now, in certain situations, when an in-home separation needs to happen or an out-of-home separation needs to happen, they can be a wonderful tool. It's like chemotherapy. It's miserable on the body and it can save your life. And I don't know, I've never had chemo, but I imagine it's pretty bad from what I've seen. So separations is almost like that. It's like, look, we're going to almost kill you in order to save you. And so when a separation occurs, I'm always pushing my couples, know what your goals for the separation are. You don't want to just separate without goals. And so what we're looking for, if you've had an in-home separation for 20 months, part of me says, hey, if it's a he, okay. If he has been sober for 6 months, that means that for only 6 of those last 20 months have you seen sobriety, which sobriety isn't the only determination, but sobriety can be very helpful to realizing that there's some stability. So that, it might have been pretty ugly for a while, but now that you feel like, okay, we've got 6 months, the fact that you're asking this question, here's the part you may not like. You've got to start getting uncomfortable. You've got to start pushing the boundaries a little bit. And by boundaries, I mean pushing the boundary level, the boundaries of comfort a little bit. So I'm going to make some stuff up here because I don't know your situation, but it might be, let's try sleeping in the same bed. Well, you could even go further. Let's try sleeping in the same room one night and see what that's like. See how we feel. Then another night, let's try sleeping in the same bed and see how we feel. It might be, let's get naked around each other and just see what that's like. And then let's have one of us shower and the other one talks to the other one while they shower, right? Like, as weird as that sounds, start pushing the boundaries of comfort to start feeling what needs to come up, what needs to be talked about, what needs to be healed, and start exploring all that together. And again, I have no idea, like, don't do anything I've told you to do on here, if that makes, or suggested you could do, because I don't know your situation at all, but these are ideas, depending on the level of separation you've had. You just want to start integrating more opportunities for connection, more opportunities for vulnerability, and take that as slow as you need, but push yourself as hard as you can to the levels of discomfort that are going to create opportunities for connection.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing up, know what your goals are before you do it. I mean, the term is therapeutic separation usually. And a good therapist will make sure you know what your goals are and what the boundaries are. Like if it's an in-house separation, don't just kind of do this on your own. This requires a therapist.
It's so interesting how many couples will say, hey, we're doing a therapeutic separation. And I'm like, okay, what goals have you set? What is your plans for reintegrating? And they're like, we don't have any. Okay, then you're just doing a separation. Like, well, we've already instituted it before we even start, like, we talk to a therapist. And I'm like, okay, well, let's work on this. And there's a part of me that's like, oh, you can't just, I mean, sometimes you have to, for reasons of safety or whatever else. If you separate, take care of yourself and make it therapeutic after the fact if you have to. But yeah, you want to figure out what your goals are.
Yeah. This next question, this is a great question. You referenced this already. This is from a betrayed partner. The betrayal has hit me so hard that I do feel crazy. Can you talk about the difference between borderline personality disorder and complex post-traumatic stress disorder in a betrayed partner? How can I tell the difference? What a wonderful question.
Oh my gosh, it's absolutely a wonderful question. Well, let's see here. there are a lot of times when I'm working with betrayed partners and they show a lot of similar traits as borderline personality disorder. The difference for me is that when I'm working with a partner, is if it doesn't subside and continues to happen despite treatment efforts, despite increasing support system, despite tools being used and time in therapy, if it doesn't subside, at that point, I'm looking for a possible BPD diagnosis to explain things. But to give you an idea, for this may sound like a weird little stretch here, but like I can be working with a patient who, unbeknownst to me, has an eating disorder. And because of the erratic nature of an eating disorder and the stresses that it causes on the body, an untreated eating disorder can look just like BPD as well. And so you really are looking for stabilization and consistency over time. And if you're not getting that, and despite tools being used and social systems being integrated and you know, a partner leaning in and starting to empathize and connect, and you're still having the erratic behavior, then you really need to start looking at the possibility of a BPD diagnosis, at which point you might look at DBT as a treatment modality that can be really good. In fact, I would stay out of, and this is the hard part, anybody with BPD, you're not going to want to go visit the trauma. You're actually going to want to work only on emotional regulation, and don't try to go in and do trauma work if there's the possibility of BPD, because that can be fruitless. Now, I'm not an expert in BPD, and so I would honestly consult with a therapist who works more with personality disorders. But that would be kind of the gist of looking for the difference, and some tips of maybe what to look for and watch out for, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and true personality disorders like narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder are actually relatively rare. There are lots of other psychological and emotional issues, as Matt was talking about, that manifest for periods of time as if I'm a true narcissist or as if I'm a true borderline. Addicts, we look like true narcissists.
Yeah,
Usually we're not.
The number of times I have betrayed partners like swear to me, no, I've looked at the diagnosis, like he or she is a narcissist, and I'm like, that may be possible, but the reality of it is that people who struggle with addiction take on narcissistic traits, unfortunately, and you can't tell if they're a true narcissist until treatments happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and betrayed partners often look like they have borderline. When you're feeling crazy, you're probably feeling crazy because you're all over the place, and it can look like BPD, but it's probably not. I mean, most of the time it's not. Just take those diagnoses carefully. So, like Matt said, check with a true expert before you start self-diagnosing.
Yeah, and I'm at a space where I technically can diagnose that type of stuff, and I don't, because I know where my expertise lies. And so I stay in my wheelhouse. And I remember going through school and I started learning all this stuff I learned, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was diagnosing everybody everywhere. And it's like how many of you are watching a YouTube video, or you hear somebody talk about different traits and you're like, well, is that me? Is that me? Is that me? Like, we can all take certain traits of things and diagnose ourselves with it. And so be very careful you start to throw that around. And I would find somebody who, before I get a diagnosis, I'm going to find somebody who specializes in it, like who really knows it in and out before I'm going to run with the diagnoses. So
Yeah, and personality disorders, they are manifesting before the addiction, they are manifesting during the addiction, they are manifesting after the addiction. They're continuous. Addiction usually will healing from betrayal and healing from addiction will usually, the symptoms will clear up. If, as Matt said, if they continue, then you really need to seek a specialist. Anyway, okay. I have been continuously re-traumatized on almost a weekly basis by my sex addict partner since early May. I feel completely broken as a human being, and I have started to lose hope that I will ever feel normal again. The pain I feel is so acute and sharp that I have trouble functioning as a normal human. My nervous system is so messed up that I can't even drive myself places. I feel completely dependent on my sex addict partner to support me because I'm completely devastated. How can we possibly rebuild when I am constantly being re-traumatized? This individual has been diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is in therapy for that, and is taking medication for that. It's not helping. Thoughts, Matt?
Whew. To be honest, I was listening and just thinking at how much pain. You did a great job of describing the pain. Here's the hard part. If you're in therapy and taking medication and you don't feel like it's helping, man, there's a part of me that wants to suggest like, what would it look like for you to call up a friend or a sibling and say, can we, you and I, go and spend a week somewhere? You don't even have to spend money. Go camping, go somewhere, and just spend time in nature and see if disconnecting from your experience, meaning at home, if you can feel your nervousness, your nervous system, if you can feel it regulate. Because part of me, as I'm hearing all of this, is I'm saying, man, you need to, again, I'm not going to recommend this for you guys because I don't know, but it may be a situation where you guys start exploring, would some type of a separation be best for me to get stable? There's times in this situation I say, hey, you might need to get checked into an inpatient facility so that you can get away, get full-time care, and get stabilized. And there is nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's wonderful. Look for retreats. I don't know of any off the top of my head, but look around for a retreat for betrayed trauma or betrayed partners. Look for something you can do to get away and get yourself out of that environment and see if you start stabilizing. If you start stabilizing, then it's like, okay, what do we need to change in the environment? What do I need to change in my daily routines and my self-care so that I can start getting back to a stable place? But absolutely, I would not, I would encourage you, I was going to say I would not dissuade you. I would encourage you that if this continues, you may need to find a treatment facility that allows you to just disconnect from all the responsibility you have and do full-time healing work on yourself. And I've seen that. That is not uncommon, that somebody gets so broken from such a painful trauma that they need the space to get stable. So those are some suggestions that I have. And I'm sorry you're experiencing so much pain. That's got to be terrible for you.
Yeah, and PTSD symptoms are very common among betrayed partners. There's research on this. The vast majority of betrayed partners experience at least some of the symptoms of PTSD. Some of them, if it lasts 6 months or longer, then you get the diagnosis. And if you're being re-traumatized, I'm with Matt, if you're being re-traumatized every week, that feels really unsafe to me. And this is one of the reasons that somebody might recommend a therapeutic separation, or, more intense work for you. But yeah, again, we don't know your situation, so we can't. Anyway, so take this for what it's worth. Next one, can you explain? Did you have anything more you wanted to add to that, Matt?
No,
Okay.
I love it, and I love the conversation. Honestly, guys, anybody listening, you've got to take care of yourself first. Because if you can't take care, like if you can't get the help you need, you're just going to continue to struggle. And so that's unfortunately why in this healing process, so often we are told, like, take care, like do your individual work and then do the couple's work later. And I don't know that it always has to be that way, but sometimes it really is necessary that we've got to focus on the individual first just to get stability because of how damaging this can be for both people, really.
Yeah. Okay, next one here. Can you explain prodependence a little more? This is their first time here. So prodependence.
Prodependence. So I'll do this. Okay, so basically, what years ago, Melanie Beatty and Pia Melody wrote various books on codependency, and the idea at the time was essentially trying to understand why a partner in these relationships manifests the behaviors that they manifest, this over dependence or this over nurturing of somebody who is in addiction or abusive or whatever. And the whole idea, the theory that they essentially came up with was that, and the message that they sent out at the time was, you need to realize you're just as broken as your partner, and that you wouldn't be in this relationship if you weren't so broken. I think overall, the message that they were trying to send was, you need to get healthy, and you need to find healing, and you need to find a healthy level of interdependence. But the message that really kind of got out there was, you need to no longer be dependent, and you need to, how do I say this? I'm trying to be, I appreciate what they were doing in the work, but it ended up being a very potentially shameful message. And
it got twisted. I don't think Melody and Claudia and the other founders intended it to become this blaming, shaming thing. I think it got twisted.
And I think because there were so many betrayed partners who I've been close to throughout my life, who found so much healing in the codependency model. But I remember they used to just tell me things that they would hear therapists, they would even say it themselves. I'm broken, and I'm just as sick as he is or she is, or their therapist would just say, you're sick and you're broken. And they would hear these very shameful messages. And Dr. Rob, well, like many of us, were like, there's a part of this that isn't right. But Dr. Rob spent the time to basically present a different model. And that model is, you're hurting and you're in pain because you love this person, and because the attachment bond has been fractured. And there's nothing wrong with you for loving somebody who has an addiction. And there's nothing wrong with you for trying. You can't love too much. Some of your behaviors may not be healthy, but you're not broken because you love somebody with your whole heart. You're not broken because you've been trying to repair and save a very broken relationship. You're in fact, it shows how loving and caring and wonderful you are, even if your methods really aren't that great. So anything you'd change about that, Scott?
I would just add that the work that codependence therapists recommend involves self-care and healthy boundaries. And the work that prodependence therapists recommend involves self-care and healthy boundaries. It's a reframing of what the issue is, from being there's something wrong with you for being with an addict, to isn't it wonderful that you can love someone despite their addiction? Let's celebrate that, and let's help you do it in ways that are better for you and better for the addict.
Yeah. And even then, I mean, in this work, we don't want to shame the addict, right? Like, I don't even love using the term addict. I try to say person struggling with addiction. I had somebody on here call me out, and they say, well, then how come you don't say person struggling with betrayal? Because I don't think usually when we say somebody has the person who's been betrayed, we're not saying that that's their identity, but one day it might become a shaming thing and we might need to change the word. But ultimately, we don't want to shame anybody. The person struggling with addiction usually is a little boy or a little girl who learned to survive through this unhealthy behavior that became addictive. So we really don't want to shame anybody.
No, okay, this next one, it's a long question, but I'm actually going to read it all. Sometimes I shorten them, but I'm not going to do that this time. My porn addict husband has supposedly been sober since May after a lifetime of denial and relapses. His support is a weekly CSAT therapist who is very lenient and 2 meetings a week online. He gaslights and gets defensive if I ask him for check-ins, which we agreed to. Now he has a business trip to Vegas, which he is extending for 4 days to do who knows what. This makes me sick, as he does not care that it upsets me. He flippantly discussed divorce 2 nights ago, and I said I'm sad he prefers to live in his disease and destroy a family. He thinks that because he supported me in my alcoholic relapse 13 years ago, that I owe him. I've been sober since 2010 and work a very hard program. I said the difference is that I did and still do everything possible to save my marriage by working my program. This is very, very painful, and I don't know how I'm going to pull myself together when he is in Vegas. We're getting a lot of pain today.
Absolutely.
It's not really a question, but you have thoughts on that? I mean, how do you pull yourself together when, you got somebody who's...
I'm going to go back to focus on the things you can control. I would right now, before he goes to Vegas, I would reach out to as many people in your support system.
Oh, he's there already.
Oh, he's there already?
Yeah, and it just extended his trip for an extra 4 days.
Oh, I see. I must have misread that. Okay, so right now I'm going to reach out to my friends and I'm going to say, hey, who can spend time with me? I need help regulating. I need help co-regulating, right? Like I need people around me who love me, who care about me. And then I would also right now, as funny as it sounds, I'm going to say it in a weird way, distract yourself. Go find some fun things to do. Go do good self-care with these friends, with the family that you have. You have to let go of that he could be doing who knows what. And honestly, I'm not going to spend my time thinking about it. I'm going to spend my time thinking about what are all the things I can do? What can I do right now to have fun? What can I do right now to spend time with people, to distract myself, to enjoy myself? Because if he comes back and has to share with me some sort of a slip or a relapse or whatever, that sucks. But I can't live my life waiting for that to happen. If you're just sitting there stewing over all the possible things and scenarios that could be going on, that's awful for you. You're making I wanted to say you're making it worse on yourself, which is kind of true, but I hate that he put you in this situation to begin with. You don't deserve this. That sucks. And so my recommendation is coming to the webinar is great. You have some people that can speak to you and hopefully provide some comfort or at least understanding that you're not alone. You are not alone. Now go not be alone. Go spend time with people, get yourself busy, do some good self-care. If you can afford it, go get a massage, go get a mani and a pedi, right? Like go spend some time on you. Obviously don't do anything you can't afford because that's not good. But definitely get self-care and get the support you need right now. And I'm sorry you're going through this. It sucks that it sounds like is not being very sensitive.
Yeah. Next one here, I see a lot of info on CPSD, that's complex post-traumatic stress disorder caused in childhood, but not so much in adulthood. Why is this? Do most betrayed partners that are diagnosed with PTSD likely have CPTSD? What are the differences in symptoms? I will just simply state that complex post-traumatic stress disorder is not an official diagnosis. It's kind of it's a proposed diagnosis, but I don't think it is a diagnosis yet. With that, I will turn us over to Matt.
So the interesting thing is we've tried to get to a place where it's almost like you have people with PTSD. Okay, let's say somebody throughout their life, let's say they don't have a lot of complex trauma in their life, right? but they experience a horrible car accident and they see death and carnage and whatever else, and they have some PTSD from that, right? The difference there is that you have somebody who has a reasonably stable life, who doesn't have a lot of trauma or throughout their life. They have a PTSD experience, and for whatever reason their brain turns it into PTSD, and it's struggling to clear it from their amygdala, and then they need some help clearing it, healing, and moving forward. That complex PTSD is essentially, we've got trauma stacked on trauma stacked on trauma, and those of us who grew up with difficult childhoods, if you've heard me talk about the ACE studies before, the Adverse Childhood Experiences studies, there's so much data and research around that. Like I think I score a 7 or an 8 depending on how I score it, so let's just go low, and I'm a 7 on the complex, if you will,
which is very high.
which is very high. And I say this to people never to brag. I actually say it because I'm a happy, healthy person, because I've done a lot of stupid therapy work and I've gotten healthy, and I've had to fight for it. And you can fight for it too and get healthy too. And my family got into therapy when I was young, and that helped. And I've got an incredible mother who was really supportive and understanding as best she could be while she was going through her own trauma. And so I've got a lot of really good stuff that have gone on. But when we get into like that complex thing, and then you have different types of trauma, you've got big T traumas and little T traumas, and you've got all these little words that try to explain. Big T trauma is major events. Little T traumas are repeated events over and over that formed a trauma. And so it's really tough, because to be honest, I don't know that we're ever going to understand why the brain does exactly what it does. Why is it that people with complex trauma tend to have more trauma later in life? In part because a lot of times we pick unhealthy people because we are struggling to be healthy because of what's happened to us. But that's where codependency used to basically say you're broken and you're sick, and prodependency says, no, you love people and you hope the best for people, and so you trust people. And some people that we pick when we struggle to see clearly are unhealthy. So I have no idea if I've answered your question. What are the difference in symptoms? Complex trauma, people with complex trauma, like I have complex trauma, and my symptoms can come back at any time with like the slightest of things happening, and I have to regulate those symptoms regularly. And something relatively small can bring a lot of that trauma back up, and cause nightmares to come back up, and cause body tremors to come up. I have trauma tremors, anxiety tremors that are just, for me, it just takes something small, and next thing I know, I've got tremors coming back. And it's not that I'm even that anything major's gone on, and I have to learn to regulate and reach out and get my needs met. But somebody with like non-complex PTSD can often resolve that PTSD and go back to a pretty stable life without symptoms coming back at random. They can, but not like somebody typically with complex trauma, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think this is just me throwing something out, but I think this is because layers of trauma, there's so many different kinds of trauma coming from so many different angles over such a long period of time, that there are just so many different triggers. Somebody with a much more standard PTSD, like guys coming back from war or something. I hate to call that standard PTSD. It's miserable.
Well, and the crazy thing about people that go to war is they've actually found that people who sign up for military service, and I may not get this right exactly, but I'm trying to remember, but the number of people who sign up for military service are more likely to have complex trauma in their childhood than somebody who doesn't. And so the rates of PTSD from servicemen and women are often as high as they are because you've got people who came in with complex trauma to begin with.
Yeah.
And so it's really a painful thing to realize how prevalent that is.
Yeah, and everything you talked about, Matt, at the beginning of today's group is symptoms of PTSD. I mean, the feeling emotionally all over the place, physical symptoms, including pain. Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. Read that if you're interested, people. It's wonderful. This next one isn't a question again, but clearly you've hit a nerve today, Matt. And I want to read this. I feel completely out of control in my own body, of my own body, my brain, my emotions, etc. I used to be a healthy, happy, smart, successful person. I have been slammed to the ground continuously and feel like I'm going to have to climb a ladder out of a pit while people keep breaking my bones.
And I'm going to push you. That happy, healthy, smart, successful person is still in there. I'm going to tell you, and if you can hear this, find her. I think if I remember right, it's a her. But anybody who's listening to this, find the him or her in there who is healthy, happy, smart, and successful. And you can do this. It's painful. It's miserable. But you can find people in your life to get the support you need to get back where you need to be. And there are times where I've told people, maybe you do need a separation, right? Even though you heard me say in the beginning, it's I don't love them. Maybe that's what you need to get that healthy, happy, smart, successful person back out. And so don't think you're stuck. Like, yes, it's miserably painful. As much support and love and help as you can get from other people, the better. Get your support system up. Go to church again. Go to family again. Go to your social gatherings, your 12-step groups. Go find your people who can help you pull that healthy, happy, smart, successful person back out. You don't have to stay there, but I don't blame you for not knowing your way out.
Yeah. Just real quick, we've got some questions that we're not going to get to today. So I have copied them and pasted them into my little save it for next time document. And we will get to your questions in 2 weeks when Matt is back. I also have post-traumatic stress disorder, similar to Matt, but not the same, but post-traumatic stress disorder.
Because we're all different.
Yeah. My trauma is different. Your trauma is different than somebody else's trauma.
And mine present physically with tremors and things like that. Looks like I have the chills. Yeah. So Scott, you got it too.
I get little brain zaps where I'm just like almost like a seizure or something for half a second, and then horrible anxiety. And I was reading this saying I feel completely out of control of my own body, my brain, my emotions, etc. And I used to be a happy, healthy, smart, successful person, and I could have written this myself easily. And
you are not crazy. You need to know you're not crazy. This is real.
Yes. And to reiterate what Matt said, the happy, healthy, smart, successful person is still there. And please find that person. I'm grateful to be an addict, because an addict is what got me into a process of healing, not just my addiction, but my life. If I hadn't become an addict, I would still be completely out of control of my own body, my own brain, my own emotions. I'm grateful that my life crashed, because I got the therapy that I needed. And I still, like Matt, have moments where, boom. I've learned to reality check. Am I feeling something right now, or am I feeling past trauma? And if so, either way, what can I do about it? What's real? What's not real? All of that stuff. But it doesn't rule my life today like it used to. And I think Matt would agree with that with him. It doesn't rule his life today anymore.
Yeah, like it'll come up and annoy me if I don't know how else to say it. And sometimes it's actually me saying, like, I'll get that come up and I'll say, hey, kid, and I'm talking to the kid inside of me, and I'm like, hey kid, you're not alone anymore, buddy. Like it's gonna be okay. It sucks right now. It doesn't feel good, but you're not alone. And I've had it come up at times for different reasons where I have to reach out to my support system. And I've done that. I'll reach out to my support system. I need you to tell me I'm not crazy. I need you to tell me that I'm not alone. And I'll walk through scenarios. Look, I need to go back through this scenario because the story I tell myself is that I have to be thinking about this wrong. And maybe what I'm hearing from the outside is right. And they'll reassure me, no, you were there, you know what you experienced. No one else can tell you what is real, hold true to what you're feeling. And it's like, okay, all right. So it's such a wild experience to have that trauma come back up, especially when it comes up as strong as it does.
Yeah. Yeah. So please hear us validating you and telling you that there is, a light at the end of the tunnel. Um, so we're out of time. Thank you, everybody.
I am so proud of you guys. Scott, I love what you've shared. I mean, you guys are, I don't know why, I just felt inspired to talk a little bit about betrayal, and it is such a cool process that we all have to heal. I don't think any of us are unable to heal. We've just got to reach out and get the support we need. So good job, everybody, for showing up. I love that we've got questions to read next time as well. And we'll just, on the 24th, Scott and I might just dive straight into the questions.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, this was just inspiring today. And thank you everyone for your honesty with your sharing. So yeah, we will see you in 2 weeks. Matt, I love the new office.
I know. I do too.
And wear your even cooler socks next week for us, will you?
I'll have to remember. I've got some fun ones. I'll wear something good regardless.
Oh, you always do.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
See you guys.